our communities have different needs. How we can charge electricity can really affect the economic outcome of a town. Some of these towns that we saw serve all farmers or factories, and their price of electricity is a huge part of their budget. So very sensitive to decisions that we make on the national level. So some of that is like the cost, but also how does this cost get spread out when we make some of these big national decisions on, Buy America, what types of kind of standards we need for the different equipments and transformers we need, and how do these things all fit together. NRECA does a really great job of listening to its membership, how that affects the people in their communities, and trying to drive change to make sure that, our more rural areas aren't left by the wayside.
Welcome to Gridlock, Engineering for the Real World, the podcast where we explore the people, ideas, and technologies shaping the infrastructure we depend on every day. I'm your host, Dr. Paul Moses. Each episode, we go beyond the headlines to hear from the engineers, researchers, innovators, and industry leaders solving real-world challenges in the energy, infrastructure, and technology domain. Today's guest is someone whose career spans utility engineering, national leadership, artificial intelligence, entrepreneurship, and even craft brewing. And it's our very own Nick Shumaker. Nick Shumaker is the manager of system engineering at Oklahoma Electric Cooperative, where he has helped lead engineering initiatives that have dramatically improved system reliability, in fact, reducing outages by 70% in the past 12 years. He also serves as the national chair of the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association's Transmission and Distribution Engineering Committee, giving him a front row seat to the opportunities and challenges facing electric utilities across the country. Beyond his work in the utility industry, Nick is the co-founder and CEO of GridVantage, an AI company helping utilities make smarter operational decisions, and he's also co-founded Legally Brewed, a reminder that engineers don't always stay inside one lane. In this episode, we'll talk about building reliable electric systems, separating the promise of AI from the hype, what it takes to lead engineers through this change, and why curiosity and entrepreneurship can take your career in unexpected directions. Nick, welcome to Gridlock, Engineering for the Real World. How are you?
Thank you, Paul. I'm so excited to be here. Always great to be working and speaking with you. We've had a lot of successes over the years, and I feel like I learn something every time I talk to you.
And likewise with you. In fact, just for the audience's sake, we've been working together for the past 6 or so years on a National Science Foundation project, Socially Sustainable Solutions for Oklahoma Infrastructure, S3OK, and we've had a lot of great cooperation and collaboration with Nick and OEC, who shared with us a lot of crucial data that helped us delve into some of the resiliency and reliability aspects of modern grids. So thank you again, Nick and OEC, for that fruitful collaboration. But let's start with, I'd like to get to know more about you, like where are you originally from, and how did you get into an engineering study and career?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, so I've always been a Midwest guy. I was born in South Bend, Indiana, where the University of Notre Dame is. So my dad is famously Guy Far in background of the movie Rudy, so we're happy about that. And then my dad's company got bought out. We got relocated to Dallas, so I spent a lot of my youth also growing up in the Texas area, where I went to Texas A&M to study electrical engineering, and ended up studying a power subdiscipline there, which sounds like I really knew what I was doing. But I applied for electrical engineering because that's what we were studying the day that I applied to A&M. And I just had faith that I would be in the right place, or I would figure out it's not and be able to make a different decision. But I would really say I really got into engineering. I had kind of one of those peoples in your lives that really kind of changes your trajectory. I had a great physics professor for 2 years in high school, really showed me what it meant to really apply yourself. I think I was always really smart, maybe not as dedicated, showed me kind of the fruits of being a dedicated person. I also really credit him. He really took a lot of time out of his schedule for us, which is something I tried to do, but also really inspired us to do a lot of giving back to the community. He founded Special Olympics for our entire school district. He did robotics team, which I really liked. That's when I knew I wanted to be an engineer. You could be competitive, and the things that you do turn into reality and actually have an effect on the world. But also, raising money for kids in need and stuff like that. Kind of being a well-rounded person, which I think is really important. obviously the work we do is important, but having other things to rely on and to give back to the community, I think really helps level it out. And then I grew up on a cooperative and always heard my parents talk well about it. For those of you that don't know, cooperatives are one of the ways that you can kind of organize a utility. They were started under FDR to serve underserved or non-served areas as electricity kind of came to the United States. All the for-profits, which I'll kind of call IOUs, investor-owned utilities, would serve the big metroplexes and kind of leave the more rural areas to fight for themselves and many times not have electricity. You know, you can only imagine the difference in quality of life of having versus not having electricity. So we're not for profit. We're member owned. We don't make margins. We don't everyone on our board is on our electric system, so they're members of our community. So all the decisions that we make are community based, which is amazing. And I was very lucky to make a connection here in Oklahoma. A lot of my friends had ended up in Norman, kind of serendipitously, and I interned here, and I made sure to show them that they should keep me. And now it's almost 15 years later. Still here and really, really enjoying it.
Right. So OEC was your first job out of college. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Outside of I worked at Jamba Juice, so I don't think that that really counts. But yeah, my first adult job, and I got very lucky that this is a really great place to work, and I'm thankful every day.
Well, I'm grateful that you described the OEC, the cooperative structure in America, because it's actually quite unique to North America. I don't think it's quite that prominent in other countries. In fact, I know where I grew up in Australia, there's nothing like that. It's all state-owned and or government or investor-owned. So going more into depth into the cooperative structure, I think I read on your website that the reach of cooperatives is more than half of America is served.
Correct. Yeah, it's. I believe you can check me on this. I believe we serve 63% of the landmass of the United States, but we serve under 40% of the people. Right. So we have a lot of infrastructure. And kind of, you could think the way that we started, we serve the rural areas. So we have a lot of infrastructure, but we don't have a lot of people to spread the cost of that infrastructure over. And a lot of the areas, I think we serve something like 80% of the persistent poverty areas of the United States. So there's a saying, there's 900 electric co-ops in the United States that all operate independently for the most part. But at the same time, we're a huge community that works together, which is pretty unique. If you work at Microsoft and are having a problem, you can't call someone at Amazon to help you out. That's just not the way it works. But for me, I can call my co-op, just to the south of me, a rural electric co-op, or I can call someone in Florida, or, put out to the entire United States, like, hey, I'm seeing these issues or problems or solutions. What are you seeing? And I'll get emails or calls back from engineers at other places. So it's a very collaborative, communicative society, which I obviously really, really enjoy.
Right. And do cooperatives also own generation and some transmission and distribution, the whole slather of it?
Correct. Yeah. So we buy all of our energy from Western Farmers Electric Cooperative out of Anadarko, Oklahoma. They also have an office right next to us here in Moore, Oklahoma. So they are generation transmission only cooperative. So they own the power plants or make power purchase agreements. They are a member of our power pool. They build and own the transmission, but the only customers they serve are other cooperatives. So they don't deal directly with the end user. That's where OEC, as a distribution only cooperative, we kind of take over from the substation level and serve the communities. And then we serve directly all the people who receive electricity, which means we also bear all the costs of the entire grid and pass them on directly. And, only really a small percentage of the costs that we pass on to the member comes from running OE. Most of that comes from the grid and obviously the fuel and energy cost to produce that electricity.
Right. I think what impressed me is that it's quite an equitable arrangement of the membership. Whether you're a large consumer or just an individual house, you all have the same vote as a member if you're part of the OEC. So that's quite amazing. And this is a good place to segue into the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, NRECA. Could you please describe NRECA and its purpose and your role in it?
Sure. It's, like I said, we're very communicative, collective, collaborative community. And NRECA is our national way of doing that. We're kind of, the word is we're small separately, but we're very large together. I run a medium to large size cooperative, but we're much smaller than a lot of the investor owned utilities by a large margin. But again, together we serve a huge amount. So it's kind of almost like a union. NRECA actually runs a national pension. So almost everyone who's on a cooperative can buy into the NRECA pension, and it's spread throughout the United States. So, local stimuli of positive or negatives don't affect that. We do lots of training together. We lobby Congress to make sure that the rural areas of the United States aren't overseen for the more urban areas. And it's a really great place to kind of get together. We also have lower levels of that. So I do a lot of work with OAEC, which is the kind of NRECA, but for Oklahoma. So we do more, regional trainings and safety inspections and working together. OAC helps us if there's a big natural disaster, which unfortunately tends to happen in Oklahoma. They can kind of help us get outside help from other cooperatives from the state or other states to come in and help us. NRECA, again, kind of does that, and then at the national level. And we all it gives us more mechanisms to all work together.
I think you mentioned some of the successes of that. You come together and you help out in emergencies and all that. Can you outline some other successes? I know you mentioned lobbying in Washington, and I think in the news there's been a lot of movement from NRECA and cooperatives to make some change to or legislation that will protect reliability in your communities. Is there anything you have to say about that?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's always ongoing things. It's funny, we kind of, in some ways, run the same business we did 100 years ago. We put wires in the air and deliver the same electrons that we deliver the exact same product that we did 100 years ago when we started, but the challenges are rapidly changing from the user end, the kind of quality that they need, to the types of our ability to produce that energy, to, hyperscale needs from data centers and other technologies popping up. So yeah, they're always looking out to make sure that the decisions that we make at the national level are able to be instituted by these smaller institutions. There's co-ops that serve 1,000 people and have 12 people that work at the company, but they need to provide and be able to execute the same way as, PG&E out in California that serves 5 million people and has, thousands of people. We just have different, and again, we have different needs. Our communities have different needs. How we can charge electricity can really affect the economic outcome of a town. Some of these towns that we saw serve all farmers or factories, and their price of electricity is a huge part of their budget. So very sensitive to decisions that we make on the national level. So some of that is like the cost, but also how does this cost get spread out when we make some of these big national decisions on, Buy America, what types of kind of standards we need for the different equipments and transformers we need, and how do these things all fit together. NRECA does a really great job of listening to its membership, how that affects the people in their communities, and trying to drive change to make sure that, our more rural areas aren't left by the wayside.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't discuss the recent storm we had on July 4th of all days, and it was quite a large storm in Norman. And could you describe how extensive that damage was and anything pertinent about the restoration experience that OEC was part of?
Sure. I mean, that's if you're going to be at a utility, that's where you get the real utility experience, when you got to spin up really, really quickly. So this was a very interesting storm. It wasn't supposed to be high powered at all, and it definitely wasn't supposed to hit our area by a large margin. Like I said, it came on July 4th, which means a lot of people are on vacation. A lot of people are at home. You have different resources available. And at the last second, just kind of came south, hit a lot of our really urban areas, which means a lot of our denser areas where more of our members live. And we had 100-mile-per-hour winds come out of nowhere over a huge swath of area. So very potentially devastating. We do, like you kind of mentioned at the beginning, we've reduced our outages by 70%. A lot of that is preparing for things like this. So a lot of the engineering and decisions that we made over the past decade go into this moment, but we serve around 68,000 electric meters over our entire system. At the height of our outages, we had 10,000. So one in about every 7 people was out of power. We were able to get that number down to 100 members out within 24 hours. And then probably took another 12 hours and we got that down to 3. And then an extra probably 24 hours to get those last 3 people connected back to the grid. Now, we do have portable generators, so those 3 people aren't out of power for that entire time. So as we get down to those harder to solve problems, we do make sure that those members are least affected as possible. We lost about 45 poles. For kind of context, we have about 140,000 poles on the system. So we're really happy with those numbers. I really feel like a storm like this had hit us again 12 or 15 years ago. We probably have 200 poles out, 250 poles out. And that just takes time and money to fix. And we invest in stronger poles. We invest in different sorts of materials and engineering practices that are a little bit more cost upfront. But we see the payback from this because our average installed pole, about $3,500 all dressed up. So, being able to reduce that a lot, we see that investment that we're getting. When I saw little investment 8 years ago, I did a presentation called What If I Spent $70? And for a $70 larger pole, we increased our overload factor by 4x, so we quadrupled it. Can't save everything, but if you can really mitigate those damages, we really see that. So, the life of a lineman, which, are really the heart and soul of a cooperative. Middle of the night, big storm runs in, their ability to, go into this bad weather, go into this destruction. Our investor-owned utility in town, OG&E, had, tons of power off as well. The entire Metroplex was off, going out into the dark, into the rain, into these high-risk situations and making sure, working, huge shifts to make sure people get back online. I mean, we do as much preparation on the engineering side to reduce that heartache, to reduce the problems that we're going to have, but solving those problems, that comes down to the linemen, putting in that hard work and those long hours. And that's why, we're able to have much faster restoration times than investor-owned utilities. Like I would imagine OG&E didn't even start fixing poles for 12 to 24 hours after it happened. So, we really prioritize that because we know that's what's important to our membership because we serve everyone. We serve people who have medicine that needs to keep cool. We serve, single mothers, people on Social Security that, losing the food that they had just bought that previous day for 4th of July could be really financially devastating. And those are people in our community. Those are our neighbors. So that really drives a lot of the decision and the grit that you see from our in the field personnel.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the linesmen. They're often the unsung heroes and get up at all odds of the hours to try and protect us and do quite risky work actually to restore that power but they're very safe and they're well trained. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And specifically I think OEC is one of the few utilities that are really progressive in embracing new smart grid technologies beyond what the norm is. So could you describe some of those technological efforts that have contributed to OEC being one of the most reliable utilities in the state?
Yeah, one of our new projects that we've been kicking off, it's our in-house project ACES, which stands for Adaptively Controlled Electric System. It is not only the new technology, but it's all the decisions that we make from the materials we buy, to how we do maintenance, the things that we focus on. We're very data driven, all of those things pulling in the same direction, which is something that you don't always see. But kind of this final technology part of it, which is tying a lot of the decisions that we've been making together over the last 10 years, is a terrible acronym. It's called FLISR, FLISR, but it's basically like being able to reroute power around outages. So a lot of times you can really sectionalize the amount of people that are out by reflowing power from different directions or different stations, being able to do that very, very quickly. For better or worse, an outage is defined as 5 minutes of no voltage. So if you can reroute power in under 5 minutes, it doesn't show up on your outage reports. There's a lot of people that you see a lot of 2-second blinks or, momentary outages. Those are still very annoying. I don't like just glossing over that, but there's a big difference between a 2-second or 10-second blink and being off for an hour or 2 hours. So the technology that we've installed, we started with, it's only 4 of our 80 feeders that we serve. So a feeder, kind of think like if you're looking at your circuit breaker in your house and it says kitchen, you flip that breaker, everything in your kitchen goes off. A feeder for us is, comes out of one of our stations and serves maybe the north side of a town, curls around the river or something like that. That's kind of like how we think of sectionalizing our system, and then we sectionalize within that. And we kind of track that so we can kind of see like, hey, here's our system average. Which of our feeders are suffering more than the others? What is some of that low-hanging fruit that we can get? So we started with 4 feeders 4 years ago. Those 4 feeders are in Metro Norman. So it ends up being about 6,000 members, so almost 10% of our total members that we serve. And in the time that that's been running, it's reduced outages further. So we have a 70% reduction over our whole system over the last 12 years. That area has seen a further 70% reduction. And in fact, if that area was its own utility, it would be the most reliable utility in the United States by almost 40%. So it's had kind of a huge magnifying effect on the things that we're already doing. We put in another 5 feeders at the beginning of this year, and my goals are to get another 8 before the end of the calendar year, and then do somewhere in that 8 per year. Hopefully in the next 5 to 6 years, have roughly 80% of the entire system on this technology. And this technology is a mix of programming in the office, but it's also in the field devices that are able to give us very quick real-time data, and it's able to break load and smartly make decisions very, very quickly because you're dealing with the speed of light, with electricity. So things happen very, very quickly. So we've been extraordinarily happy with that. It's been definitely the most technically challenging project I've ever worked on, and not only working on it, but creating a younger workforce that is also able to work on it. Because as this project gets bigger, I can't be everywhere. I can't do all of it. So OEC has been really great on giving us time and resources to train the infield personnel to understand what's going on, to train our dispatching, to be able to react as the system is changing without them doing things on it. And like I said, training the linemen, this could have been a really big point of contention of like, hey, a computer's controlling the system. How does that affect my safety? How does that affect my job? Why is this something I want or don't want? And we spent a huge chunk of the project educating, having their input, having demonstrations for them. And after we got done with our first trial run of it, because we're big trial people, let's try it before we really buy in. Really, the only question I got was, when are you going to do this in my territory? So it's been very successful. It hasn't been easy by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that by hopefully, again, we're collaborative by laying this ground and showing what we did right, what we think we had done differently. We can hopefully inspire other co-ops to kind of come down this road and solve some of these problems and try and make it as easy on other people versus kind of being one of the first ones out of the gate. Now, there's been versions of this system for the last 15, 20 years, so it's not always new tech, not a new idea, but the new tech really allows us to roll this out in a really smart way. And a huge shout out. So one of the things that OEC has done in the last 10 years is start its own fiber company, OEC Fiber, which now serves about 48,000 people, subscribers in our area. And having fiber to all of the technology in the field has made a really impossible problem much, much easier. So I can't get through talking with that without giving them a huge shout out of making sure my hair hasn't turned gray.
Okay, well, that's quite an interesting point. So your OEC and other cooperatives have embarked on providing broadband internet services to rural customers who don't ordinarily have access to that, maybe, and also you're saying you're piggybacking that same system for your protection and monitoring and SCADA. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. That was one of the big selling points of going down that road when we were originally choosing to do it, is making sure that this would benefit the electric side. That way, if maybe the business didn't go well or we made different decisions, we could always feel good about that investment because it has helped make the electric grid more reliable, safer, giving our members more insight. Luckily, it's been one of the more successful broadband projects in the entire country. Our area was very, very unique. We're in kind of a fast-growing area, so there's a lot of people moving in, a lot of people moving into rural areas, and it's really the same problem that I described earlier. The for-profit people went to the really dense areas where you can get a huge return on your infrastructure investment, and really just left the rural people to kind of deal with it. And in the same way, we're like, hey, we need to provide for our membership, and our membership really wants this. And of course, like a lot of things in life, and a lot of things we'll probably talk about, magnified by COVID. People are at home now. People are learning at home, working at home, and that need for good internet access is almost, in my mind, approaching the need for reliable electricity. It's becoming one of those goods that you just have to live in this modern world. Be proud to bring that to a lot of that membership that was dealing with really low speeds, really high costs, line of sight things that didn't work very well. And now they have super high speed, super reliable fiber to the home to run all those things in their lives or businesses.
Okay, regarding the ACES technology, this switching around, is there anywhere people can get more information about your experiences and lessons learned? Because I think this would be as you said, low-hanging fruit for a lot of utilities to try and implement in their systems.
Yeah, we actually have a webpage on our okcoop.org where you can kind of follow along with our process. If anyone contacts me directly, I give national speeches on it. This was part of 2 national classes that we've done over the last 2 years. Again, detailing what goes into those decisions. Because one of the other things, as we talk about solutions, we say, if you've seen one co-op, you've seen one co-op. Solution for me is not going to be the same solution as someone in Florida, as someone in the mountains of Colorado. We all have enormously different starting problems to come with. So, you don't want to follow my exact decisions without understanding what we are trying to solve. I'm always a very problem first person, not a solution first person. That nothing drives me more crazy than someone with a solution looking for a problem. I think you don't get the good ending. But yeah, we're very transparent about the work that we do. I mean, I've even sent over documents and other things to investor-owned utilities. I don't, we're not making margins. We're not trying to be competitive. We want, part of being an engineer, I think it's a little bit my patriotic duty to make a better, stronger grid for all Americans, because it's a huge national security thing. And again, it affects our lives. You never notice until you don't have it, how much it really, really drives all of your daily life.
Is the natural progression of this to include, because you said you refeed sections from alternate sources or substations, would eventually battery and distributed energy resources also assist in that refeeding and restoration in the future?
Yes. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that's the future of the utility. It used to just be, you get the energy here and you kind of push it out linearly. You have more energy closer to your stations until it kind of peters off till you hit all of your people. I think the future is a super, super dynamic, load-driven topography where people are going to have, batteries in their cars and their houses that maybe are taking in energy and maybe pushing back out onto the system. People are going to put power walls. People are going to have all different types of systems. And I think as a utility, having those things more in play, the kind of microgrids of where you can use some of that stuff again to reduce costs, to increase reliability, to deal during natural disasters. I know one of the co-ops in Florida had so much solar that when a big hurricane came through, they were actually able to isolate part of the grid away from everything else because they had so much capacity to generate on site and were able to keep people online when, if you weren't investing in those technologies, you wouldn't be able to do that. Those people would have been off for a very long time during a natural disaster, which is, it has such more investment when things are really bad to keep those people on power. So I definitely want to get through more of this traditional, what we're doing now, ACES, because batteries and these different technologies that we're going to see coming up also add a lot of complications. But, any project that we're going to pull off has probably we've been working on, studying, meeting vendors for 5 to 8 years before it. So those are all things that we're looking in now. And one of the other things too, we always talk about generation, but you can also have what they kind of call virtual power plants, where people can reduce their load or shift their load kind of in real time as maybe outside stimuli is affecting the grid. So if you have an AC unit or some sort of refrigeration that cycles on and off, and you can play with maybe how a lot of those are cycling, maybe they don't stack on top of each other, maybe they move out and you charge your electric cars in the middle of it and then you kind of drop it out. So you still get over the whole day the same amount of energy, but it's not all at the same time. You can kind of spread it out. Those are some of the things that we're investigating now too. So there's going to be a lot of options. And I just, if there's any students, listening, I think the next 20 years are going to be super exciting. There's a lot of problems to solve. There's a lot of problems that we have, but that means there's a lot of room for people to make their mark, find the right decision, and, dramatically change people's lives.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned virtual power plants, because I was just talking to a colleague interviewing her from Australia, and she was describing that they are piloting a lot of VPPs where at the battery stage, where they're controlling the battery usage of home owners and using that to lighten the load on the grid and so on. And I think in California they're piloting those as well. So do you see that in the near term future for Oklahoma, that maybe OEC would try some of those technologies?
Yep. We've been meeting with vendors. I have a couple of meetings in the next weeks on it. It's one of those things, like, you just want to have a very robust toolbox. So as problems pull up, you have a whole bunch of different tools that you can use to work on it. I don't think and all these technologies are never 0 to 100 for the most part. There's going to be people with different needs, but again, we are not for profit. So if we can we're like one of the only industries, like, a lot of my job is to find out how you can buy less of my product. So if we can reduce your energy usage, reduce your demand, because demand has billing components to it. If you're running a store or a factory or, some sort of commercial property, if we can find some ways to reduce those price points for you, like, that's a win for me. I'm happy to help you figure out how to intermix renewables or intermix the way that you are running, maybe find something more energy efficient in lighting, or find some way to, like, beat the market essentially. So that we spend a lot of time on that with our members, trying to find out how to reduce their bills. So yeah, yes, it's going to be a huge part of it, whether people want it to or not, because we are driven by our members. If our members don't turn anything on, we don't produce any electricity. If they put on more stuff, we have to generate more electricity. We have to build more infrastructure. It's not a two-way conversation. We have to meet their needs. And if their needs are, hey, I have batteries and I want to reduce my energy, I have the ability to change my thermostat, or I'm open to doing XYZ, we have to find a good way to meet them there and to execute.
Okay, I think this kind of leads into my next question about upgrading and dealing with aging infrastructure that I think most utilities are facing, that they're reaching end of life or beyond end of life, and we're trying to milk as much as we can out of really legacy architecture. So can you describe or explain to the audience, like, the issues with aging infrastructure? For example, the street transformers that we all have, and or even a substation. When they're installed, there is obviously the foresight that the load will grow, and that substation or transformer should be there for several decades. But now we're seeing really unprecedented load growth with EVs and data centers. So could you describe those challenges and how OEC and utilities in general are trying to combat that?
Yeah, I mean, we have things in our system 40, 50, 60 years old. And of course, if you can extend your infrastructure. So I think there's like three things here I want to talk about. There's increasing demand, which is putting demand on maybe a system that wasn't built for that in an area that wasn't built for that. You have aging infrastructure, regardless of demand, of just people are behind on maintenance. They're behind on upgrades. They haven't planned for it. You see that all over the country. And then you just have, your maintenance. How can you extend the life of the equipment you have? Because if you can extend it cheaply, we pass those savings on to our members. That's a good thing. So it's kind of a Venn diagram. Those all are definitely on top of each other, but they're all also separate problems. So for us, kind of the last two, the maintenance and the aging infrastructure, that has been a huge component of our increased reliability, is rethinking how that is, using data to really drive those decisions. And it wasn't, I wouldn't say, immediately popular. I definitely had to have small wins to really change, me with the other people that were early buy-ins of the system that we wanted to do, which is essentially like, look at how we can do a better maintenance problem and find equipment that is in a failing state before it fails, because you have to go change it out and that costs money. And on the balance sheet, it just looks like you're spending money. It's so hard to capture kind of upfront. The organizations are kind of prepared to capture savings. So if I change out maybe a lightning arrestor, through my maintenance program, through my data, I think this is an area where I'm going to have more failed lightning arrestors. Lightning arrestors help protect the system from lightning. And if they don't work, you're going to be more susceptible to lightning strikes. And that equipment can fail catastrophically and cause an outage of its own. So it can cause a fire on the pole. It can kind of explode and get into the other wires, causing an outage. And now you're running maybe a crew that is really far away overnight, double time. You can spend thousands of dollars on overtime costs to change out the same part that you could have done during your normal maintenance program. And that's a lot of the things that we've done, have prioritized being able to find those problems. What types of problems do we have? What site-specific areas have certain problems, to find those early? And then since we're changing it out anyways, a lot of times changing it out to something much nicer is a really small increase in price. And by doing that, we've seen that our outage time go way, way down, reliability go way, way up. But we're saving something between $500,000 and $750,000 a year just in overtime, doing the same things that we were doing before, but doing it in a smarter way and using data to drive those decisions. So I think a lot of people see aging infrastructure as kind of a surprise, and it shouldn't be. That should be something that you're looking into at all times. But I think people have kicked the can down the road, and they just need to pay. It's time to pay the piper. So it's time to figure out the best way, most efficient way to do that. I've seen that at other co-ops and other IOUs where they just let this problem sneak up on them. And unfortunately, it's not going away. And one of the big things that I try to preach and teach through NRECA is, like, if you get ahead of it, if you do this preemptive stuff, it not only makes your system better, but you save money. And we have the numbers to prove it. And I try to share that all the time and really drive those decisions. I kind of compare it to having a car. Yeah, you can push off your oil change time and time again and save $100 here and there, but then your engine seizes up and you're way money behind. It's about getting out ahead and doing those things. And if you're going to be working on the engine anyways, put in a little bit nicer thing. Spend that $70 on a nicer pole and get that huge overload so that pole doesn't fail at the rate that it was. So that's, again, where I'm lucky to work at a place like this, where we can really share our wins to hopefully kind of influence that. And now that's getting doubly hit, these hyperscalers, I think the easy one to point to is like the Bitcoin and the data centers, because they have just news grabbing sizes. But we're seeing it from everywhere. EVs pull a lot of energy. An EV can pull on a level 2, 12 kW on a house. Our average house is 10 kW anyways. So if someone buys 2 electric cars, suddenly their house is tripled the size that it was. And you're just seeing a lot of extra things like that, where, when we make decisions, you're like, hey, we could save a nickel here by putting a smaller transformer, but this transformer has to sit here for 20, 30 years. Let's maybe make an investment of not what we need today, but what we think we're going to need into the future. We're doing that with our substations. We're building bigger substations with area for extra expansion in the future. So when we inevitably have load growth, now it doesn't cost as much to increase that, versus we have to build a whole new site and do an engineering plan. And now we have to build more stuff in the community, which is just never popular. You just planning 20 years out, where I think for a long time in a lot of these areas, load growth was slow. You didn't have to do a lot. To plan 20 years in advance would seem crazy. You'd be over investing and driving up costs, where now basically in every market, in every way, things are in a huge pointed up direction. And we were having to, again, COVID kind of changed things, really broke supply lines. So the things that we buy are more expensive and increasingly, almost exponentially getting more expensive. And the lead times are getting crazy. Things you used to be able to get in a month are now 2.5 years out. Substations, you used to be able to do in 6 months are now 4 or 5 years. So you're having to make decisions further in the future, which means you have less information, which means you have to take more risk. And the industry just at large isn't used to that. But I think we're pivoting and a lot of my work through NRECA with 70 other great engineers at co-ops and consultants across the country. I think that's what drives us to volunteer to do that stuff, is to kind of package these solutions and wins and kind of prove to people like, hey, if you do things this way, we can save for our membership. But I am worried that there's going to be a lot of people who continue to bury their heads in the sand, be like, this load growth isn't sustainable, so I'm not going to plan for it. And then it's going to catch up to them. I'm not going to invest in my infrastructure because it's not falling down right now when you had a great opportunity to change the oil on your car before things got bad. And now you're on the side of the road, you're missing work, you have an engine you have to pay for versus, hey, on a normal day, I could have had somebody go buy this pole. They were 5 minutes away. I'm paying normal time to them. There's not an outage. There's not a disruption. It didn't cause damage on other infrastructure that I have. It's just a cheaper way of doing things. And to just invest a little bit, we treat all of our poles. We dig up all of our poles on a 10-year cycle to look for ground rot. We inspect our transformers. Again, letting data kind of drive like what things are in a failing state and how can we get it before it fails.
Right. And I think that's a very healthy attitude, because I've heard the kind of the opposite, where some utilities know their transformers or assets are overloaded, and in the summer particularly, and their kind of thing is, well, we'll fix it when it fails, and they think that would be cheaper. But you're really arguing the other side, where if you preventatively, plan for that failing state, you will actually save a lot more money than running it till failure and then have outages.
Right. And that is, I hate to say, a prevalent theory is just, I'll fix it when it's broken. And I know there's been other utilities I've called in. I was like, hey, this is broken. You need to come out and fix it. And they're like, well, it's not off. We won't come out until we fix it. I was like, this is such low-hanging fruit. This would be so easy to fix, and you're going to cause yourself a much bigger headache. I've never understood that point of view. I don't think that I plan on understanding it anytime soon. And hopefully us and other co-ops and utilities like us can kind of change that line of thought.
Right. And you were talking about new substations. Is the community becoming more accepting of having new substations, knowing the benefits it will have in the long run, or is there still a lot of difficulty in getting approval to put new substations?
No one likes infrastructure, and people like infrastructure less by where they are, or if that takes time out of their day. And that's just true across the board. Anytime there's road work, people are mad about it, even though it's necessary. Road widenings, new roads. I mean, anytime we build infrastructure, just people aren't going to be happy, I think, as a baseline. And that's understandable. But we do try to work, at first, the first thing we do is we try to be as unintrusive as possible. Try to cut as few trees as we can, try to disrupt the natural area as much as we can. We obviously try to not take out houses or other things like that, and to affect as few people as possible. But as few people as possible is still affecting people, and those people probably are going to have a negative reaction, and I don't entirely disagree with it. But yes, it is important, as we kind of talk about. It's an interesting place to be in as a utility, because you're trying to describe this load growth, and some people aren't going to like that load growth. Hey, I live in a rural community. I don't want more people moving here anyway. So even as you describe that, it helps that they're not going to be happy about that. And then there's, the fear of, again, these data centers, other hyperscalers, like, hey, are you building this for them and I'm going to have to pay for it? So that's really an everyday conversation from the utility to earn and keep the members' trust. And I think it's something that's really great, is we get to be really, really open, talk about the positives and negatives of the decisions that we make with our community here in OEC. We try to not be secretive and kind of talk about it, but it is going to be a problem, and it's going to be an ongoing issue. One of the things that I'm really trying to get us, that we're doing a better job of now, is building or getting prepared to build some of this big infrastructure before we need it. Because after you need it, after the whole town grows in, now there's nowhere to put it. Or now you have to be really disruptive and really destructive to the community surrounding that. And it's part of that kind of my mantra of planning a little bit more ahead, getting out further ahead, because, you buy the land earlier, it's cheaper, it's less disruptive, those sorts of things. But that's hard, as our growth is really, really high. We serve the highest growing zip code in Oklahoma. There's other areas of, large loads coming in. So planning further advance is something that, is a challenge to kind of rewrite the culture that way. Even here where we've been really successful, there's still lots of disagreements on best ways of doing things. But yeah, it's and of course, if you handle that improperly with the community already doesn't trust you. You aren't really thinking about the community when you make engineering decisions. It's something I really preach to my team as I kind of mentor them and teach them how to be engineers. Like, hey, we're just dealing on a grid or a white background with lines on it, but these lines have people next to them. Somebody might have owned that property. Their grandparents owned it. They got in, it's been in their family for 100 years. They're going to think about that white space next to our line so much more than you are. So you really need to think about things other than the engineering solution, because we serve people. Everything we build is around people. And if you have to have that human element when you do these things, when you make these decisions. And again, explain it to people and just know that some people aren't going to agree with you and some people aren't going to like it. And some people, unfortunately, are going to get a little bit the short end of the stick. There's no perfect place to build new infrastructure. No one wants a substation next to their house or across the street. But at the end of the day, it has to go somewhere. So that onus is on you to make as good a decision as you can.
Well, along those lines, this question comes up a lot about undergrounding some of the older overhead lines, and even new subdivisions, or even since the 70s, they've had underground distribution at least at the street level. But is there a case to underground some of the older overhead lines nationwide, or is it not really going to be that beneficial, even though it would maybe cut outages and restoration costs?
Great question. Again, I want to start with I solve the problems that I have in my area. People are going to have different problems. A great example would be Florida. Can't really underground in a swamp marsh. Again, if you're in Colorado and maybe you're on the rock, you're rocky terrain, it doesn't make any sense to dig into this super hard rock. So people are going to have different versions of this answer. I will say, we underground all our new additions. There's things that we underground. We definitely will go out and do what's called a rearrange. If someone has some aging infrastructure and it's overhead to their house, we'll redo it underground. But we've been doing that for the last 20 years, I would say, at least, if not longer. We haven't changed any of those practices in undergrounding during the 12 years of reducing our outages. So all of that, we've still undergrounded things during the time that our outages went down, but there hasn't been a change in the way that we've done that. So I don't attribute any of the increase in reliability that we have had to undergrounding. And I think that surprises a lot of people, because anytime there's a storm, they're like, we have to underground this stuff. And we underground a lot of things. I think undergrounding has a lot of positives, but it also has a lot of negatives. It's expensive. It takes much longer to repair. It does still come above ground. So the way that basically everyone builds stuff now is the underground goes in pipe. That pipe traps the heat in versus the ground that would normally let kind of dissipate that heat. So as soon as you put the wire underground, you lose about 30% of your ampacity. So you have to build bigger wire to kind of even stay with the status quo. And it goes in runs. So you have a run of underground pipe with wire in it, and it'll come underground in two different places into a cabinet. A tornado comes through, it's still going to hit that cabinet and then maybe pull all that wire. And now you have a ton of wire to fix, and can be expensive and time intensive. It's also very hard to modify. So overhead line, one of the advantages is, hey, you got a new house coming in. Hey, just put a transformer on it, pull a wire off, where now you maybe have to rerun a lot of things or get into it. So at least for our solutions, again, here in Oklahoma, undergrounding our main arteries has never seemed like a cost-effective way, because it's a zero-sum game. The board's going to give me $10 million to make things better if I have to spend 5 of it undergrounding a couple miles of line, or I could spend, an eighth of that just up, beefing up our overhead lines, which is one of the decisions we've done. It's funny because for those of you that know, Norman, Oklahoma is a hotbed for extreme weather. OEC's seen 2 of the 5 largest, most devastating tornadoes in U.S. history entirely within its grid. We're always in the top 3 areas in lightning strikes. We get these huge straight line winds. There's something called the heavy loading district, to where how you build your poles. It comes down just to hit us before it goes back up north. So we get huge ice accumulation on our lines, which adds weight and also ability, acts as a fan, so more wind can catch it, so you get more of that moment force on your poles. So we get to see it all, and we get to see it regularly. And by just beefing up poles on the west side of our system, the west side tends to get hit by those ice lines and also doesn't have a ton of windbreak. There's not as much trees, as it's not as much of a prairie. So those winds can really, really hit our poles. No two storms are exactly the same, but we had a storm come through. The utility next to us had very similar that they had last time that came through. They lost, I don't know, 500, 600 poles. And we would used to lose 500 poles, 400 poles. And now this last storm, we lost 15. So I think for us, that investment of being able to touch way more lines while keeping it overhead is a big deal. And then something that people really don't think of, transmission. So transmission is in the same area as your distribution, and that's where all the power comes from. And it is such an engineering feat to put that underground. There's so much energy. There's so much heat, and I don't even think they have it anymore. The only underground transmission that I know of in the area used to be at Tinker Air Force Base for, it's a smaller area than it would be a whole town. And obviously it's a major Air Force base. So it kind of makes sense that you might want to have some of that stuff underground. And I believe they had to pump hydraulic fluid into the ground to try and wick some of that heat away. And the price for that is astronomical. I don't even know, maybe $5 million a mile. If someone was building it, again, there's not a lot of it being built. So even if we put all of our distribution underground, made that huge investment, ice storm comes through, and if it knocks a transmission line off, it was kind of all for naught. Where if you can just, maybe you still have some poles down, but you've really reduced the cost of being able to fix that. You're able to reroute power, still keep, 90% of the people online, which is what we've seen from our ACES program. Again, people are going to solve their own problems their own ways because they're going to have different stimuli. You're not protecting against tornadoes in an area that you don't get tornadoes. But for us, we review our data every single year, because just because we made the right decision 12 years ago, maybe the problems have changed and that's not the right solution anymore. I'm still really confident our overall strategy of our technology, beefing up our overhead line and increasing technology in the field is the best bang for the buck, because I only get so much money each year. I don't have unlimited funds. And if I did, I don't know what I would do with it.
Well, that's fantastic. I think you explained it very well for those who are for that question, because it's not so obvious the reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. So switching gears, I'd like to talk about something very exciting for you, is that in addition to your engineering roles, you've become quite an entrepreneur in a lot of ventures. And could you tell us a little bit about some of these new ventures? For example, your new brewery, Legally Brewed.
Yeah. So it's say new. We actually just celebrated our third year open, serving the community of Norman. Really fun project, started by all people who work at OEC with me. Our head brewer is our head of HR. He's also a magician. He's a very interesting human being. But I used to live by him, and I'd walk down as he was just brewing stuff in his garage. And then he started doing competitions and things like that, and kind of came to me and hey, I think I'm going to make a run at this. I mean, everyone still works at OEC too. So, for me, it was, I believed in what he was doing. He was very excited, but also how many times in our lives do we get to really invest in somebody that we care about's dream? So, I had some extra money, was able to make that investment, and it's been a really cool space. Obviously, they make really cool, fun drinks and beers, but I'm really proud. And these are a lot of decisions that him and his wife and some other people have made of really kind of making that third place. We kind of lost that during COVID of a place where people can gather. Obviously, bars have kind of historically been that, but really making a place where if you don't drink beer, you can still have a fun time there. They have vinyl nights, video game nights, local artists will come out and show how they do their art or sell their art. It's the best spot in the metro for karaoke. And just lots of, really engaging with people. They can meet there and do things. So I'm providing non-alcoholic options, food and treats and other things like that, to where it's kind of that place where you can get together with the community. And they've just done such a great job at putting that stuff together. Great live music acts. So if you're looking for great live music in the area, we have a great acts and a great stage coming through constantly. So that's been a lot of fun to kind of be a part of and kind of see grow and just see the labor and love of the people that you care about really come to fruition.
Well, that's fantastic. And where exactly is this?
It's going to sound fake. It's on 123 Main Street, but it's in our old Main Street in Norman, Oklahoma, by the train tracks, kind of where the town grew out of. And again, they do a great job of really, being friends with other businesses in the community and being kind of proponent of the community. Kind of obviously comes from that co-op mindset of being part of the community. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And, most businesses, what is it, like 6% businesses fail in their first 3 years. So to kind of get over that hump and still be really successful is really exciting.
That's great. I mean, what kind of lagers and beer? This is another podcast, I suppose. But what do you have your own special blends and drinks there?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Trying new stuff all the time, but also trying to the my favorite beer, which is the one that he made in his garage one day, where I was like, "You're really onto something." It's a lime jalapeno lager, so it's a little bit spicy, a little bit citrusy, but still really light on the tongue. It's great. No one makes anything, I think, anywhere near as good as it, but we try to make things for everyone. We have a whole host of seltzers that are really fun and good for those that don't want to drink the beer. We have great heavy beers, great, dark beers. My personal favorite is the Mango Habanero Stout, which is a very unique set of flavors. Really good IPAs and kind of everything in the middle, and new stuff coming through all the time. The two brewers that work at OEC are always really excited, especially when they try something from someone else to kind of like inspire them to do something new. So, if it's been a while since you come back. I bet we have your old favorites, but also a whole host of new stuff.
All right. Well, we'll put a plug down in the in the link so people can go and visit that. I highly encourage that. So that's great. And about your other company, GridVantage, is that right? And could you describe that company and what motivated you in pioneering that effort?
Yeah, this, like a lot of things I do, just came from frustration. I was frustrated with software companies. I was frustrated with the solutions that we had available to us. And two of my friends that used to work at OEC went and joined and partnered, are partners at a cybersecurity company that does cybersecurity for electric co-ops. And we thought this was a really great idea to kind of take a lot of the things that we've done at OEC and digitize it and kind of make that platform where people can do it. It has turned into an AI company, but it didn't start out that way. It started as a data, and it still is very strongly a data analytics company, a dashboard company, a best practices company, kind of a one-stop shop for reliability. I want to give a big shout out to OEC to not only being a big supporter of me kind of doing this stuff on my own time, but has recently made an investment and is part owner of the company. So they've put their name on it, which is really cool. We have a lot of exciting things that we're working on, but trying to just like a lot of this plan that we've done, being able to automatically dig into your system's data. Because one of the things we talk about, we're making a smart grid, everything's getting smart, you have all these sensors. All this data lives in different places, they're hard to get to. The voltages that I get from my meters, all my meters store their voltages in an Excel file every hour and are just saved onto a server. So I have 10,000 Excel files. And then that's indicative of a lot of the systems I have. I have all the data. I also don't have any access to it. I can't make any decisions off it because it takes me too long, especially for cooperatives where your engineer might also be, answering calls from your members. They might be going in the field. They might, they're doing a lot of their own project planning. So, we wear many hats. So to spend a whole week to get an answer is very difficult. So we've imported our entire OMS system, which is like 120 databases, over 1 million lines, and have pulled out a lot of really great dashboards for people to be able to access, to be able to track these large decisions, see the low-hanging fruit, and then have been training our own AI that's only for electric cooperative utilities. It speaks the way that we speak. It creates the decisions that we do, and most importantly is safe. We have a lot of stop gaps and things that we've done in it to where it fully explains what it's doing and comes to correct conclusions. To date, I've never had a hallucination in about the year and a half that we've been running it, which is very exciting. We haven't had it do wrong math ever as well, which sounds easy, but man, the amount of times I use Claude and it doesn't add stuff together is really getting to me. Again, a lot of this is born from frustration from the tools that I have, and we've trained. I've went through and explained what the entire database is to the AI. We've written about 400,000 question and answers, kind of show the AI like what a good answer looks like, what a correct answer looks like, and kind of built this whole module together. So we're really, really excited. And some of the next things that we're working on is getting our SCADA system in, getting our AMI, our metering system in, and then getting the one that we're working right now is getting all of our safety in. Our guys produce thousands of documents of safety, of what they're going to do and all this stuff. And again, you technically have that information, but no one has the time to go through all of that data to see, is there something they're missing? Is there something we could get ahead of? So a way we could be preventative. And then I think the real magic's going to happen once we start tying these different databases together to where the power of an AI is it can go through so much data so quick. Is there something that we're missing between our voltage reads, between what our SCADA system sees, between what our outage system sees, and kind of pulling that stuff together? And it's able to read so much. Like all of these systems, you can take notes, and our dispatchers will take notes of these things, and there's no way to access them actually through the UI. There's no way to search them. And now we can kind of pull it together. One of the first cool things we did very early on in our alpha system, we were like, ask it a question that I know the answer to. It's the only way I can know if it's a good answer. So how many animal outages did this co-op we're working with another co-op have this year? Because, we track it, it's tagged animals. So make sure you can go in and count that correctly, an easy question. And it counted an extra 18. I was like, well, that sucks. And then we're like, hey, why did you do this? I go, oh yeah, no problem. I went in and I counted all these animal outages because they're labeled animals. And then all these ones that had no cause description, I read all of the notes on all of them, and an extra 18 of them mentioned animals in them. So I included them in that. And that was a really aha moment of like, we're solving problems we didn't even know we had. And I've done that like now for animals. I was like, okay, I these are all labeled as animal. That's normally all the information I get. Read all the notes. So read 10,000 entries, read all the notes and tell me what animals were involved. And then it can do that. And then we've been putting our GIS in it so it can tell me locationally stuff. So now I've been able to recreate things that I do in my everyday life that have huge effects on OEC and that used to take me 8 hours, 9 hours to do. Now I can do it in 10 seconds, 20 seconds. And now I can have somebody else do that as well, because you don't need all the expertise that I have to go in and find this data. By expertise, I mean where the data is, how to manipulate it, how to pull it out into an Excel, because I'm an engineer, not a computer engineer. So that's where I usually manipulate my data. But now I can get all that stuff really, really quickly. And now I can start I have more time spent on making decisions on the data, where before it was like I spent way more time trying to get the data in the first place. So it's super exciting.
Wow. And I guess the follow-up question to this is I think you somewhat answered this, but how do you make sure engineers trust the AI recommendations without becoming too dependent on them?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's building the AI system. I try to put a lot into it where it references material and gives explanations and gives background and gives, hey, also think about this, because like some of the complaints we got early on when people were learning AI was like, hey, how close can I have my fiber to this? And they're expecting one answer. And it's like, well, it's this, but you also need to consider, where's your ground at? Do you have other buildings? All this other stuff that wasn't in the original question, but if you just followed the AI, you'd make a wrong decision. So that's part of it, I think, is building a good system. But I, for one, encourage my team to use AI, but to use it responsibly. I use it to sort my ideas sometimes. I use it to quickly maybe source a bunch of stuff from the internet, but you have to understand it. And we spend a lot of time, again, extra time up front, preventative, going through why does this say this? Do we believe this outcome? So I think it can quickly be a jumping off point to that decision making, but you're responsible. You're the engineer. You have to be right. I mean, you have to live with that. So, if you're shortcutting it, you don't, me and, somebody else who doesn't work in the utility industry can get the same answer from an AI, but I understand it and they may not. And I may catch things where like, okay, that's technically correct, but there's this other thing that I didn't put into the question or that you don't know about, where if you're not an expert in it or prepared, you can make a wrong decision. So I think it goes through everything. It goes through your training of employees, it goes through project management. It's, I think it's constant conversations of, interaction with your team, because ultimately you're responsible for that. It is a tool that could easily make wrong decisions and do bad things. And again, it could be technically correct, but that technically correct doesn't help you make that right solution. And, we're dealing with safety. The guys do a high risk job. They have tons of safety equipment and safety practices, but at the end of the day, they still are doing a high risk job. And our number one thing when we engineer anything is to make sure, our guys come home safe. So it's a huge opportunity, but I think people have to understand the magnitude of what we're doing. And I mean that people within the industry, not just, being lazy. So I think that's going to be a huge problem. I think it's something we're really going to have to deal with maybe in a decade, because the kids that are in middle school now that are learning maybe bad AI practices and they're going to be getting out of college. And how do we get in front of that? Are they able to do their own research and verify, hey, I referenced this. Well, guess what? You have to now go read that and make sure that that's a good conclusion to make. You have to actually read the standards that we're basing these decisions off of and understand the math. But again, I think there's more opportunity than risk there. And I think it's going to be really exciting. And I do think people are going to do it the right way and they're going to get a really positive outcome. And there's going to be people who do it the wrong way and they're not going to get those positive outcomes and they're going to get some negative outcomes. So huge, anytime I see a huge problem, I think internally, huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for us to do better.
Right. And I think a lot of people who are coming out as students or graduating, particularly in entrepreneurship with their interest in that, do you have any advice for those who are embarking on those goals to become an entrepreneur, startups and new ventures?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, I would say just like as a level set, we're all trying to do things that are going to, in some ways better ourselves. We have to make money. This is work stuff. I always say, I love work, but if they stop paying me, I'd probably stop showing up. So, that's obviously a component of it. But if you're going to take these things, like entrepreneurship is a lot of work and it's a lot of risk. I think at the very underlying thing, you have to ask yourself, even if this doesn't work, do I feel like I did something good? Do I get something out of it? Is my heart in it? And that goes to career opportunities and other things that you do in this. It's a long career. You're not going to win the whole time. You're going to have some pretty devastating losses. So I think, along the way at the beginning and along the way, you just got to ask yourself, like, is part of this for me? If this doesn't come out the way that I want, do I still feel like a more complete person, a more complete employee, engineer, whatever that is? I think that's always got to be something in it, or else you're really going to burn yourself out. But as you get into this, it is really exciting. The whole reason I got to be an engineer is I saw that some things, weren't correct. And if you can go in and do a good enough job, you can change that and things can be more correct. So, if you're getting into it, definitely ask yourself, really think outside the box of how things can be. Where are these friction points? And, I think a lot of my success as an engineer, as an entrepreneur is, I meet with the people doing the job. I meet with our linemen all the time. A lot of engineers don't. They just pass work down to them. But understanding, hey, what problems are you seeing? How can I make this better? What is this, So whether that's obviously for me, the line, but other people, like whatever you're going to entrepreneur with, like understand what their needs are. If there's one thing about people, they love talking about themselves and they love complaining. So they will give you those answers. You just have to approach them. And that goes back to kind of what I said earlier. Go in trying to solve a problem. Don't have a solution looking for a problem. You see a lot of people doing that in the industry, and it's just like, I have this thing, it does this cool stuff. How can you use it? It's like, I don't know. That's not my job to figure out. And a lot of the expos, there's stuff like that. And I think a main thing that is underrated, there's business plans, there's all this stuff. But it's networking. It's meeting people. You never know how you're going to need people. Like, when I started here, no one talked to the University of Oklahoma, but by working with you and other people, I've gotten so much value out of it. But I've also found out about grants. I've also found out about other things. I've got to meet other students. Like everyone you meet who's a hard worker, who's smart, has some sort of opportunity to help you grow, whether it's your business or you personally. So always be on the lookout of making good connections with good, strong people. Because over time, as you build that network out, you never know how someone's going to come back. I mean, the amount of people that have had just a one-off good idea that's changed the trajectory of the way that I've done stuff from just meeting them maybe a year before and having them think about something I've said is really huge. But yeah, there's huge opportunities. This reminds me of the dot-com boom. The internet came out. We know it was important. We didn't know what to do with it. And that's, I think, AI and a lot of other technology, but the AI is like kind of the big obvious one is in that way. There's this cool new technology. Obviously it does something, but nobody knows what it is. So for, I think a lot of people, maybe graduating, about to graduate now, it's a huge opportunity out there. People are figuring this out. People want answers. And if you can provide that good answer that reduces friction for them, that can make them money, that can do something that they don't have before, like now's a huge opportunity to do that. And I think it's a really exciting time to be in it. But do know, for me, every month, 1 month, I'm like, I'm the smartest person in the world. I see things in a way that nobody can see. Of course, I'm going to be successful. And the next month, I'm like, I'm the stupidest guy in the world. Why did I waste all my extra time doing this? Things aren't going well. So it is an up and down cycle. And I mean that with my entrepreneurship. I mean that with ACES. I mean that with reliability. You have to look at things over a large enough horizon and prepare yourself, steel yourself for those moments when things don't go right. Because if you don't, all of my thing is like, you got to prepare for the future. And if you don't prepare yourself for failures, and again, sometimes devastating failures, you're not going to make it.
Right, Nick. That's very good advice. I think you have to have some, not just grid resilience, but personal resilience too.
Correct.
And I'm sort of getting to the end of these questions, just a couple more. I think we're at around time. What's your take on the latest plug-in solar panels that's really taking off in Germany? And also, could you describe OEC's initiative in that solar garden and what that's all about?
Yeah. I actually got to see some of that. I think Utah was the first state to allow those plug-in solars. I know several more states have it on their dockets, so it's definitely evolving. For me, it's about meeting people where they are. How can I help them in their ways? But obviously, kind of a scary technology. Anytime you have power generation, you have energy flowing in the house. If something goes wrong, you have the potentiality of burning your house down. You lose your largest asset, or worse, cause casualties. So, for me, there's a huge threshold of safety when we're talking about things like that. That being said, from what I've seen, the UL has a new listing out for these devices. It seems to be well thought out of how to mitigate against those. So it's no more dangerous than an air fryer or anything else, and those get taken over by your breakers and your GFI and things like that. So we don't have any that I know of on our system. We got our first inquiry for it actually last week. So not only looking at the bigger picture, but what are they installing specifically? And again, those are the things that go through my mind. Another thing that I think we've done is very clever is our rates are, at a utility, you have fixed costs and you have ongoing costs. Fixed cost, I put that pole in your yard, I got to pay for it. In turn, you got to pay for it, whether you're using electricity or not. But as electricity increase, obviously we pay for fuel, increased demand costs, those sorts of things. We tend to have our rates in a really good place where member pays a fixed cost and then kind of that variable cost for kilowatt hours. So I'm not incentivized to sell you any more electricity. If you buy more electricity, we'll charge you for it. If you buy less, then we won't. So we're in a good space of being able to walk our members through their renewable journey, if that's something that they're looking at going through. So that kind of takes that friction out of it. We're just trying to help them make the best decision they can. Part of that is a financial decision. Are rates going to go up? Is this going to last as long as they say? Those sorts of things. So I'm actually really excited about the plug-in solar, because solar is expensive. Even a small system's $40,000 to $60,000. That's out of reach for a lot of people, or that's it's a huge risk that you're taking on. Where maybe for a couple $1,000s you can cut against your electric bill. You don't have to have all this extra equipment put on site. As long as these UL listings, which UL, Underwriter Laboratories has done a lot of testing on, as long as these things prove safe, which I believe that they will, I think this is a huge opportunity to kind of bring that renewable energy to people. Because think of it this way, if renewable energy saves you money, but you can only get it if you have a lot of money, it kind of leaves those, people left out who's like, hey, I can't afford this. So now, not only can I not afford this because I don't have enough money, now I have to pay more because I don't have money. That's not a great place. That's not where we want our membership to be in. So it's definitely evolving. And, we live in Oklahoma, which it's funny. The SPP, which serves Oklahoma, actually has the largest penetration of renewable energy of any of the grids in the United States. But still, we're an oil and gas state. When renewables came out, there was a lot of friction. And one of the things we did as OEC is we built a relatively small 250 kW. It's on 4 acres, what we call the solar garden. We had some extra land that couldn't be used for anything next to one of our substations. And we wanted to install it. So when our members call us and they say, how do these work? How does this stand up to hail? What kind of maintenance do you have to do? We wanted to own something so we can say, hey, here's what we've seen. Here's what our garden is doing. Here's the pros and negatives. Here's things to think about. But where that happened to be was off of I-35, which is one of the large, highway arteries in the United States. And it's between Norman and Oklahoma City, which is the first and third largest cities in Oklahoma. So one of the unintended but positive consequences was, where I was talking earlier, think about your environment, got a lot of eyes on it. A lot of people had questions about it, and not a lot of people, hey, I've always thought about solar, or how do these things work? So I kind of came up with a walking tour that I gave. I think at this point I've given about tours to maybe 4,000 people throughout the seven or 8 years that that's been live. Educating people like, hey, here's how this stuff works. Here's what it looks like. Here's what we've seen. Hey, this doesn't work during the winter. Hey, if it's cloudy, you're not going to get this energy generation. Here's the maintenance that we've had to do. So far for us, the only maintenance we had to do is it's been hit by a car and a semi. So as long as it's not semi-proof, but we've had hailstorms come through and we haven't had to change a single panel. And now we've built a larger scale. So the first one was 250 kW. The second one we built was 2,000 kW, so 2 megawatts. Still small when you think about generation sites, but we built that in collaboration with Norman Public Schools. They wanted access to solar, but again, huge cost. That's a bond. That's things to think about. So we were able to make that. We give them the renewable energy credits, which reduces their fixed costs. And this is a bigger site that's easier to give tours at. Still hoping one day I can invest in some pavilions and cover and other things like that. But it's been a really good opportunity to kind of double dip. Hey, we built this, but then we also got this extra positive impacts for our community by just thinking a little bit outside the box.
That's excellent. I think my final question is just generally, what do you believe is missing in the energy industry? Any opportunities that you think should be given more priority in this nation from your point of view?
Yeah. There's so many upcoming new problems. And kind of going back to what I said, I think thinking more long range, getting ahead of things, don't let problems bubble up. And from like a solving stance, that kind of we're talking about that the renewables with the batteries, with the virtual power plants, with electric cars, all that kind of stuff. That more dynamic system isn't settled yet, and I think there's a ton of opportunity there. Now it is difficult, but and we're taking our best steps into it. But battery technology is still pretty new. I was talking to a co-op in Indiana. They bought 3 batteries from the same manufacturer that kind of, came in all in the same year. They kind of staged it so they could get one installed operating before the next one came in. All 3 of them came in with different controls and different batteries and different components because everything was changing so quickly. And they've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars a year by installing that, but it's also been an everyday maintenance item. So there's still a lot of unknown technologies and there's a lot of risk. And in our industry, it's just, you have to make huge investments. And are you willing to take that risk or do you kick that can down the road? Because I rarely get in trouble for a decision I didn't make. I also rarely get praised for good decisions that I do make. My CEO always says, no one calls you and tells you you did a good job for not blowing up any of the transformers. But man, you blow up a couple transformers and your phone is starting to ring a lot. So, it's people don't see when you do a good job. If you do a good job, nobody notices. So, I think there needs to be more opportunity for people to take risks because we are now in a more high risk area. And one of the risks, I think, is getting new young talent into electrical utilities. A lot of people are having trouble hiring. There's not as many trained people. And I'll give a kind of a thing out to the students listening, like it's huge opportunity. There's nothing but growth. There's nothing but new problems to solve. It's essentially layoff proof. People need electricity every day. It doesn't matter what the stock market is doing. For co-ops like myself, we have a pension, we have great health care. If you're not sure where you're going to live, I guarantee wherever you move to is going to have a utility for the most part, unless you're really going, to the Yukon and Canada or something like that. But even then, I bet they got some local electricity. So you're not tied down to one area necessarily, but we need to get good young people in, and then we need to train them properly because it does take a lot of information to do this. So, utilities need to invest in their people, and it's scary because investing in engineers is expensive. And like I said, the positive for the person is they could go down the street, work at a different utility or a different state or somewhere else. So, I think a lot of people are wary. I think the less foresighted people are wary of investing in people because they might just go somewhere else. So there needs to be something I'm working on with NRECA is both a new employee introduction program to put young engineers with people like myself that have been in the industry a long time to show them the things that you don't learn in books and create that sense of community. I think they'll get trained better and have a higher likelihood of retention. But then we're also working on trying to work directly with universities to have, bring students online to a utility for a while and bring NRECA is going to try and bring those same students onto NRECA so they can get a national view And then you kind of come out with this fellowship certification that should make you more hireable, but also get more people into the industry. So it's something that we are working through NRECA in our own small way to solve on a national level. But I think workforce is something that's very, very worrisome. And that doesn't even get into the lack of linemen getting in, because it is a tough job. And some people are starting to value their free time more than they are, maybe overtime and working hard. I'm not necessarily saying that's good or bad, but one side or the other is going to have to change so we can kind of keep things in equilibrium.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm so elated, Nick, and then you've just made my day with this interview. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your experiences, Nick. Very much appreciated. I mean, from improving the electric grid reliability, leading engineering efforts on a national scale, to building technology companies and pursuing entrepreneurship that's benefiting our community. It's just fantastic. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. And, feel free to drop my contact link in if anyone has any questions or wants to meet on anything, whether myself or I can put you in contact with someone who knows more than me. I know lots of people who know more than me on lots of things. So, or if you just want to come down for a drink. I'm always open for that. Thank you so much for having me on here and kind of spreading the good work that we're trying to do.
You're welcome, Nick. Very welcome. And I hope today's conversation, for those who are listening, gave you a deeper appreciation for the engineering that actually quietly powers everyday lives and the people working behind the scenes to make our electric system more reliable, resilient, and ready for the future. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and write a comment to Gridlock Engineering for the Real World. Share it with a colleague or anyone interested in engineering and the technology shaping our world. And if you have any suggestions for future guests and topics, I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Dr. Paul Moses, and you've been listening to Nick Shumaker from the Oklahoma Electric Cooperative. Thanks for listening. And remember, the best engineering often goes unnoticed, as you've heard today, but it's always making the world a little bit better. Thank you.